One more thing I have to do.
I wanted in every game you guys play, so that how the setup works. Yeah,
She's on there.
fantastic. So, yeah, it's going well. I think it's live right now. She's well.
Testing. Is this thing on? Morning, everybody. How's it going? All right. Well, thank you all for coming back for day 2. You're the troopers. You're the day tours. Thank you to everybody on the internet that is joining us. My name is Andrew Walkus. I'm the Executive Director of the Esports Innovation Center at Stockton University, Atlantic City. We're sponsored by the incredible folks at the Economic Development Authority of New Jersey and Stockton University. We are very grateful to be presenting to you. We got a great panel today with one more guest that will be making its way, and the topic is college esports and the future and how that connects in multiple different fronts. So I would like my panelists to introduce themselves and give a little bit of bio on what their role is in the collegiate esports space. Starting with you.
All right, sure. My name is Dan Coonan. I'm commissioner of the ECAC. I took this position 6 years ago. The ECAC's been an intercollegiate athletics organization, mostly in the Northeast, for 85 years, and with over 200 member schools. When I got there, we decided, why don't we jump into esports? I came from California back here, and I was trying everything I could, and a few presidents said this would be a good thing for the ECAC. So I emailed all 200 plus ADs, and within a couple of days, and said, hey, if we did esports, who'd be interested? And within a couple of days, I had 24 responses. And so since then, we've just rolled, and now we have over 1,100 teams participating in 14 games this year. That's 141 schools, but we have a ton of teams per school and a ton of competitors per school. So it's
Any estimate on how many total competitors?
I think it's maybe 8,000 now. But, that's a number I want to get, but it's well over 6,000.
Any of those on scholarship?
Yes, a number of these. So we have really competitive schools that want to be national champions, and we have schools that just got started, and everything in between. And of our really competitive schools, yes, a number of them are offering scholarships as well. So it's been a great thing for the ECAC, and I think it's been a great thing for intercollegiate esports as well. So, and I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
And we'll get more into it, but one other question that just popped into my head that I'd like to ask while I think of it and don't forget it, but is there a lot of crossover between traditional student athletes and those that play esports? Do you have people that moonlight that are in both categories?
We have some, especially at the D3 level, where the Division 1 and we really don't make any distinctions for esports, D1, 2, 3, or anything. But at the Division 1 intercollegiate athletics, we don't have as many, but certainly in D3 we have a ton.
Probably because of the rigor involved in being a team.
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Demetrius.
Good morning, everybody. Demetrius Rubos from Stockton University. I'm the information security officer at Stockton, but I also oversee the esports program. I've been doing that probably for about 4 years now. We started in approximately 2018 with a grassroots student organization. Essentially, a bunch of our students came to us and said, we want an esports program, right? And I've been a lifelong gamer myself, so obviously I was sort of interested in the idea. And we created this esports program, like I said, mostly community focused. It started with students that were interested in League of Legends predominantly, Overwatch, and then Rocket League happened, right? I assume Andrew's going to ask me about this.
Yes, I am.
But the Rocket League team at Stockton is fairly well known. You may or may not be aware that they recently took second in the world for what they call Collegiate Rocket League at CRL Worlds in DreamHack, and that was in Dallas, Texas over the summer. So the team is doing really well. But that wasn't the beginning of their journey, right? The beginning of their journey really happened in 2019 when the first team formed. And those students have since graduated and gone on to do better things. But, it started with them competing right here in Atlantic City. They did a couple show matches versus Rutgers and Rowan and stuff like that. And they participated in the CSL Grand Finals that had occurred here in Atlantic City prior to the pandemic, and also other show matches. So generally, the team has been sort of growing and facilitating their own, I would say, personal growth. And as those students have graduated, new students have come in, and they've actually led the program ahead, right? So competitively, they've become more viable. We were winning, sort of smaller matches in the early years of 2018, 2019, and now we've gotten to the point where they're global bodies. So the team has really progressed, and it's great to see that happen.
Let's have our online guest, mystery guest, reveal yourself.
I like being the mystery guest. Hi, everyone. I'm Sari Keitlin, home here in Orlando, Florida. Sorry I couldn't be there with you guys today. I'm with Full Sail University here in Orlando. I'm the executive director of esports for Full Sail. Been with Full Sail about 16 years. For those who are not familiar, we're a university that really specializes in entertainment, media, arts, and technology. So all of our degree programs focus around the entertainment industry. Started building our esports program in about 2015. And currently we have close to 100 varsity athletes competing on 10 different titles. We also have a varsity stream team and varsity casting program through the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, which we have on our campus. We have a ton of grads that are working in this space, both behind the scenes, competitively, and as coaches and leaders. Our varsity programs, we actively compete against about 700 other schools all year long in our 10 different titles. We have a huge community focus, a big club focus, and in general, Full Sail's had game design and development degree programs for about 30 years now. So our school is infiltrated with gamers. Going officially in the esports realm was kind of a no-brainer for us. They really led us here. We're a little bit different than a lot of universities in the fact that this is our sport. This is all we have. I used to say this was our first athletic program, but I've started just saying only because I don't see us magically getting all of our students to suddenly play soccer. So it's been interesting. It's been a wild ride. So we kind of had to build from the ground up without an athletics department or any sort of oversight. And we've been having a really good time doing it. We have a esports arena on our campus where we host a lot of client events and get our students a ton of experience working real events. We also host a ton of competition and competitive events and have a pretty robust broadcasting program. We're all in esports. We love everything about it and excited to talk today and answer any questions anyone has.
I think you don't want to close the door on a nautical sailing program, though, for Full Sail. I think just there's too many.
We'll always keep that open, just have to.
Let's not do that. And our last speaker, please introduce yourself.
I'm Lamont Green. I'm the Lakeland head coach of esports at Lakeland University. Been there for 3.5 years, and we compete in 8 different games in spring and fall. And we are in NACE, Star League, NECC, and ECAC. And I'll say I got into the program from a friend, a referral, and he coached and taught at the school and at Lakeland and was able to refer me to the admins. And I say that from day one, the buy-in from administrators was 100% because they had the foresight to build out a great budget to get the program off the ground, get the whole facility that was already a pre-existing facility built out, painted. Gaming stations, we started with 18 and then 18 computers, and then I'll say 2 areas for console gaming for Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, similar to what's behind us here. And then we started in the middle, basically at the start of COVID, so we had an influx of about 41 players on our roster in the beginning. And then once 21 came around, things started to now get back to normal slowly. So now we've been hovering around between 20 and 25 players for all the 8 games we compete in. And for myself, the relation I brought in from my background being a football player. I just brought in some of my coaching and training techniques we had for training camps. I do 2-a-days. I bring in the physical element where the players have to work out 2 to 3 times a week. And now we have an app that all the sports on campus actually use, so that I can keep a digital track of who is and who isn't working out. And I throw an incentive on top of that, because I think we're all incentive, creatures here. So I threw an incentive on whoever has the most workouts in a semester can win a custom keyboard and mouse for themselves. So little incentives there for the players to kind of go for, because that's what they do when gaming. They go for, they're trying to win money, or they're trying to win, be the best player in the game. So having that little light at the end of the tunnel helps them out, getting there a little bit easier. Either mouse and keyboard or controller if they're console, because we know that is kind of a thing among gamers, PC gamers to console.
What am I gonna do in the month?
Yeah, mouse and keyboard gamers. But I say, is that all I need to say?
That's perfect. That's perfect. So let me start off. We'll keep to the panel and go through questions, but feel free to interject anybody, especially over in. Are you in Florida? Is that where you're located in Full Sail?
Yes, I'm in Florida, Orlando.
Fantastic. So, Commissioner, I'll direct the first question to you. Does the same potential exist in collegiate structure to mirror what the NCAA has done in terms of sort of having a unified structure of competition across, most standards, in terms of making this more of a March Madness type thing, where you'll see tournaments and specific games kind of have a Final Four, et cetera?
Well, certainly, yeah, I do think that the potential exists, but I do also think that there are a lot of issues with the NCAA. And I could say that.
I mean, from a structural standpoint, not from an organizational copy standpoint.
Okay,
To be very careful
just
to make
from,
the distinction.
Right.
Meaning in terms of public perception of how it's organized, right?
Yeah.
Pro baseball, pro football, collegiate athletics.
Right. Yeah, certainly the potential is there. The dynamic is very different because you don't have an organization that developed the sport of volleyball and the sport of basketball and baseball that has an interest in maybe being the one to run that tournament, as opposed to an organization like ours or any one of many other organizations that are involved in it. So the interesting thing is, it's just in the few years, you see that what Stockton has done in a couple of years, this has grown exponentially just in a couple of years. And I'm not sure I know where it's going to end or even if there will be an end, but it's fascinating, and there's a ton of energy in it. There's the online versus the in-person, and it exploded during the online COVID portion.
Sure.
But now I think events will come back and play a major role, and we treat those for the ECAC differently, our online champions and our in-person champions. So certainly the potential is there. The politics of it and getting to that, I think will be challenging and complicated, but also energizing in a sense. I'd love to see what people are doing in this area and how people are sponsoring competitions. And that's certainly what would be great from a fan perspective. But how we get there, I'm not sure. And I don't think we're ready yet to coalesce around one or another. And there'd have to be buy-in from a lot of different groups to bring that about.
I think one thing that's very interesting and different about esports structurally compared to collegiate athletics is proximity plays a big role when you're talking about moving team A to place B. And you can't have divisions that are, college football, they're testing that theory, but theoretically, you're supposed to have divisions that are close together. Proximity doesn't matter in esports, right? You can have divisions set up with play that's mostly online, and then have regional, tournaments as far as determining factors where people come in.
Yes, you can, but I think what you're talking about is that ultimately people would like to see in person and with budgets. I mean, I mentioned the diversity of teams and schools that we have, and some with almost no budgets and some with a huge budget. It's challenging for a lot of these esports programs that just started to travel, and
Right.
to pay for hotels, and to pay for flights. Our Albany, we had the state of New York gives us a $150,000 grant to do our in-person championships in Albany, and in those first years we did it in Albany, people would drive to it from New England, from New York, New Jersey, New England, and but the last one we did, people were flying in. So you see programs are much better funded at the top tier, but certainly the rest of it, they're all operating on shoestring budgets, and so they're not traveling as much. But you do have the ability to do things online as well to even the playing field in that sense.
Fantastic. Demetrius, why don't you chime in? How is Stockton's experience in terms of regional play and expanded play? I mean, you talked about winning second in a tournament in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, let me comment more on the NCAA and collegiate governance right now in esports, right? I think one of the challenges in collegiate esports governance right now that separates itself from that of traditional sports is that there are intellectual property holders like Activision, Blizzard, Epic, Riot. These people are stakeholders, or these organizations or entities are stakeholders, and they define what happens in their games. So unlike, let's say, a governing body like the NCAA who can determine what happens in collegiate basketball, that is not really the case in collegiate esports right now. And in fact, even in the professional scene, these intellectual property holders are primary stakeholders in the matter. So I think that that's something that has deterred a sort of collegiate esports governance body from forming, right? You could argue that NACE is that body, but I wouldn't say that they're there yet necessarily. But esports has this intrinsic challenge because the games are owned by entities, right? So what happens in those games is controlled by those intellectual property.
And the data especially is what's critical. So as we talk about how to organize, create leagues, access to that data and having the publisher be part of that process is pretty critical, especially when you're talking about anything that might look in terms of competition or structured competition.
Absolutely, and I see that there's a giant opportunity for game developers to get into esports focused gaming, right? Where the developer is actually creating a game for the intrinsic purpose of esports.
Correct.
Right? And I think that that's something that is fundamentally different from what we've seen in the past, let's say 10, 20 years in gaming. So I think there are challenges right now in collegiate esports governance related to intellectual property.
Let me ask my guest who's online. So Full Sail's got a notable program for game development and design. And one of the things that we want to get into in this talk is the ecosystem and how that affects students and the different types of jobs that they're able to get through this industry. But game design specifically, has there been any thought or focus to esports specific game design within the game design world at Full Sail?
I don't think the conversation has necessarily gone that route in terms of esports specific game design. Most of our students were preparing for studio work. So with the larger studios, like we've been talking about, AAA studios, the game development, we don't have as often students that are coming right out of college that are starting their own development program. It's usually in the variation of teaching them the steps of storytelling, coding, arts and graphics that go along with it, for games, and utilizing all of those efforts as they go into their skill set. I know there is definitely a strong interest. So of our game programs, we have game development, which is heavy focus on coding. We have game art, which is art for games that comes from the computer animation realm. We have game design, which is really a project management focused program that helps build the games themselves and bring everything together. And then all of our ancillary degree programs do connect in for final projects and developing those games. And students do create their own games while they're here, but they wouldn't be at the level yet necessarily for competitive stake or competitive standpoint. It's interesting, the points that everybody is bringing up is it's the intellectual property issue of the fact that no one owns the basketball when there's a basketball team, but somebody owns the basketball when you're playing esports. And so there's an interesting conversation, and various publishers are approaching it in different ways. You know, Activision Blizzard really went with the franchise route. some things successful, some things not so much. And, Riot has gone the direction of really overly supporting anybody who wants to compete in their games, sometimes successful, sometimes not. And it's kind of everyone's still sort of testing the waters in that regard. And so trying to find or determine the line of profitability for those that are creating the game, as well as profitability for those that are working in the esports landscape, is like the marriage between the two that I do think the publishers and a lot of the organizations are working really well hand in hand on figuring that out. But I kind of lean towards that's where we're at. That's sort of once that breaks open, that's going to be our next I guess, phase within the esports spaces. Once there's a consistent and cohesive understanding of share of profitability and share of understanding of the landscape is really where the next level of esports kind of takes off.
It's a bunch of very, very interesting points. I think, one thing to keep in mind, games are either moderately expensive to overwhelmingly expensive to design, right? So we just talked about entrepreneurship among students. It's very hard for students to say, I've got a great idea for an esports game, let me go build it, right? So you do need even the smaller studios, the AAA, AA, single A's to get involved. I don't know, do they call it single A studios? Is that a thing? I don't know, maybe it is. I think in terms of minor league baseball, so that's how I'm thinking. But I do think that there needs to be buy-in in terms of a plan from the industry to say, let's take the first-person shooter concept and make an esports-focused, casino-focused environment game that can be deployed, and maybe that will kind of relieve the fears in terms of how these collegiate athletic games are played versus the ones that are for money, so to speak, in competition. Your experience, talk a little bit about starting an esports program from scratch and give some insight for the colleges out there. There's 4,000 universities in the United States. I don't know how many of them have esports programs, but I'm sure some of them are looking to start.
To start it up, it was just my background that I was able to gain as I was describing yesterday. When I started fanboying, going to E3, going to DreamHack, going to PAX, going to San Diego Comic-Con, but then actually going and to Shoutcast and Madden events, Shoutcast and Gears of War event, Shoutcast Halo tournaments, and talking with the behind the scenes people, so the cameramen, and audio engineers, and then people actually set up the games for us at the station. So just be having a conversation, getting to know them, exchanging phone numbers, emails, because a lot of it, the stuff I was doing at home at the time, I started to stream on my own, so I wanted to gain that information. So once I started asking questions, a lot of them would just show me how to do it. And so just getting that real on-hands experience. And then once I got hired, it was just like, oh, okay, wait a minute. I got I won't say Rolodex, but I got a cell phone full of people I could give a call to and ask, hey, what's a good furniture gaming company I could go with? What's a good PC build? What makes the build really good in terms between the GPU and the RAM and the things all gamers want inside of it to make sure it doesn't have the lag where it could be competitive. And the good thing in being, at a university and then having the university within a year, and I say within 6 months of me being hired, putting the esports program in the athletic department was a bonus, because then we had the athletic department funds to then do things and spend money on the stuff we needed at the beginning, paint the facility, like I said, 18 gaming stations, and get at that time, which was up to par on GPUs, was 2880 GPU. Now we're 3090, and those are almost extinct now. I heard that 4090 GPU is now on the market for $1,500. So it just progressively, which I knew as a gamer, things accelerate very fast in the tech world. Our cell phones to our laptops to our iPads to Samsung tablets, their age out very fast. Very fast. The same with computers, and me being a gamer, being a content creator myself, then I can relate to the gamers. So I relate to my players to understand, okay, I got to make sure if I'm going to have my players competitive, that they're playing on the best stuff. Sure, in the building, i.e., when I was a football player, the team, the Packers, they sponsor, the league is sponsored with Nike. So a lot of the players like Nike. So we're going to have Nike shoes that don't fall apart, that feel good on our feet, and we can play our best. That's one less thing we don't have to think about. So I went into that mindset is making sure these computer builds have that build to where when the gamer sits down, they log into the computer information, they could go right to the settings menu and see what's in there, and not be like, oh, coach, this is this don't have the capacity for us to compete, because they will check me on that.
You mentioned sponsorships in Nike. I wonder for both of you guys, what role do sponsorships play in this process? As this becomes more an athletic component that's part of a traditional athletic department, do you guys see sponsorships starting to come in, offers, opportunities to sponsor the teams that are part of this league?
Well, sponsorship is clearly a big part of our whole operation, and it helps that we have 141 schools and as many team participants as we do to make it the whole thing attractive to sponsors. And we have CSMG is a company that does our sponsorships for us. They partnered with them, and I think as we expand every year, the sponsorship upside gets bigger and bigger. And also, as we get back to in-person events, sponsors really like the in-person events as opposed to just the online stuff. And as we get bigger and better in-person events, certainly from a conference standpoint, those sponsorships will be bigger.
How about you, Demetrius? What's it been like with Stockton and getting that buzz for the team? Has there been any nibbles in terms of team sponsorships?
Well, I mean, we're sitting in the Innovation Center right now, right?
You're a sponsor, that's true.
So the reality of it is sponsorship isn't one of the things that I spend a lot of my time doing, right? So I'm a technologist sort of at heart, right? And I've taken the approach of developing the esports program from the perspective of transferable skills and technology, right? So our program is heavily rooted in technology, and I couldn't help myself but hear Amon talking about what he's doing in his program. And one of the recurring sort of themes that I think is coming up is passion, right? So he's obviously a very passionate individual about the things that he cares about, right? Which is athletics. You mentioned you're a football player. You're looking at this through the lens of athletics, right? Which I can't blame you because it makes total sense to do that. In my perspective, I'm looking at it from the technologist side of things because that's just who I am. It's how I grew up and that kind of stuff. So I look at the broadcast engineering, I look at the technology, I look at streaming, I look at the transferable skills and stuff like that, and that's really where we've rooted our program is around technology. And I can't knock your approach. I think your approach is brilliant, and actually that sort of to me signifies that you need a technologist, but you also need somebody who's rooted in athletics, right? So it's sort of a stratified approach to developing a holistic esports program.
There is a mind-body connection for sure. I was fortunate enough several years ago, before the pandemic, to run an esports boot camp with Julian Kritzky Academy of Villanova University. And we had a 2-week program, and it started off with yoga and stretching in the morning, and then we had a nutritionist come in and talk to the kids and a sleep expert. Those aspects are important, just like responsible gaming. In terms of betting, responsible gaming in terms of balanced play and being able to have a healthy lifestyle that goes along with it. As esports has become professionalized, that has become more and more critical. You cannot be a professional athlete and not keep your body and your approach up. So I think a healthy balance between all of these different ecosystem elements that you're talking about, Demetrius, which is a focus on the finer details of what goes into making these teams and the production, combined with the team concept in terms of building, camaraderie and learning how to participate with people and communicate, etc. Those are all two sides to what makes this so unique, because you can include both of them. And you can also introduce people who are typically maybe not athletically oriented into understanding how that psyche can affect them and change them, and vice versa. So
Absolutely.
Amon, please.
Yeah, I didn't get to bring it up, but like Demetrius mentioned in terms of what I was describing, yeah, I do have that approach. But what also I put on the athletes or my players on the roster when they are, we have our team goals, we have our team values, and something that was kind of nitpicking at me, being somebody from competition, is they wanted to stream their practices, and I'm like, I said, I don't mind streaming, but why you want to give up the goods? Yep. Going to the competition. So I was like, just think about that because if we're going to play.
They got a call from Coach Belichick. That was the idea.
Right, there you go. We play Stockton. We play
Couldn't help it. Sorry,
East
Coach.
Right, East Carolina or even Oregon or even Wisconsin. And I'm pretty sure they have scouts or they're scouting us. People, going looking down their schedule. So you have to be conscious of that. So I said, how about we do this? We stream our games because our games are going to be they're live with about a minute to a minute and a half delay. So there's really much they can't adjust to other than seeing the aftermath of the win or the loss. So I was like, let's not stream our practices, but on the weekends, you guys are welcome to come here. And then I have a select from each game. We have maybe one or two subs, and those one or two subs will be the guys and girls that'll do the shoutcasting or the commentary for the game in between. And so, I'll make sure that I try to hit every aspect, like Andrew mentioned. The brain and body, mind and body, but then also the engineering side of it, where you can have. There's so many. I've done it with my players, and I've done it with my classroom, where we play a video of an esports event, League of Legends, Overwatch, and I have them. I'll pause the video and I'll ask them, how many jobs are here in this event right here? How many jobs do you see? There's a graphic art designer for all the overlays. There's a commentary for all the two people that are in the box, commenting color and play-by-play. And then there's the event planner for this whole event that's happening. Somebody way behind the scenes, set a date, pick the venue, and pick the game tournament. So those are about 5 or 6 jobs right there if you're not the pro. If you're not the one that's playing Overwatch, you're not the one playing League of Legends. So just look at that picture. And it's slowly, with my players, it's slowly coming around that, I don't have to be Ninja. I don't have to be Shroud. I don't have to be Nick Merckx to be in the esports industry and actually make a living off of it. So just trying to remind them of that and know that they're able to do that, basically.
I love that so much.
Let me ask my online guest, because I want to get her perspective. Coming from a program that has no traditional athletics history, how has this esports program been crafted and created, not having that duality in terms of just a model to follow with a traditional sports program?
Sure. So we rely very heavily on our sponsors. We're very fortunate to have some incredible sponsors of our team, including MSI for all of our machines and gaming programs. We have a jersey sponsor called 3 and 2 that produces all of our jerseys. We have a naming rights sponsor of our arena, Orlando Health, which is our hospital local to our area. And Orlando Health actually, which is phenomenal. They also sponsor our MLS team, Orlando City Soccer. They sponsor UCF's football team. They sponsor the Orlando Ballet. They sponsor pretty much everything athletics that we have in Central Florida. And what they've done for us, which is really great, is they have what they call an elite athlete program, which gives all athletes direct access to a team of doctors, sports medicine, trainers, wellness coaches that are focused on traditional athletics. But because they sponsor us as well, our esports athletes have access to that program. And that really has been crucial to us because everything Aman says is correct. Wellness and health and training within this is imperative. The old adage or the visionary of kids in their parents' basement eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew and playing video games does not translate to esports. You cannot compete at a high level without having your body and having your mental well-being and everything that you have associated with high-level competition. And that's not something that we had experience in because we did not have that. And so we did rely very heavily on Orlando Health to bring us into the program that traditional sports were doing. We're still learning, we're figuring that part out, but it really has been crucial and critical to help in that regards. The other big thing to know, to keep in mind as this is coming, is a big differentiating factor between traditional athletics and esports is all of the games and the titles that these kids are playing on, they've been playing their whole lives, but not as a team, not as part of a team. They're playing alone. They're finding their friends. They're playing online. So we're only just now starting to see kids enter the college space with any sort of formal coaching training or any sort of communication skills or any sort of understanding on how to play these titles as part of a team. Yes, they've gotten really good and they've gotten good on their own and they play with their friends and they do it. But that transition from playing for fun and having a good time, maybe entering some amateur tournaments, and having a coach and having to understand team leadership and communication skills is probably one of our biggest barriers to entry, is just understanding that transition. If you play football as a professional, you've likely been playing since you were a kid. You've had coaches your whole life. You've had coaches through high school, middle school, maybe Pee Wee football, throughout your entire experience. When you get there, you understand what coaching is. We don't have that a lot. And we're starting to see it a little bit more with the build out of high school programs that are out there that are awesome, the build out of youth programs out there that are awesome. But you almost have to do double the amount of work with esports athletes to get them into the team mentality than you have with the traditional athletes, because they've never done that before. And that's not been a part of their lives as a gamer. And so the transition in that world has been interesting. And it's important because there's a lot of flash in the pan. There are a lot of like, oh my God, this team was awesome. And then all of a sudden you don't hear from them ever again because they happen to get good players, but they didn't build infrastructure and they don't have a sound program or platform that builds repetitiveness and constant practices and constant training and constant wellness to incorporate that as part of a team. And so that whole world is an interesting one that we're finally starting to see a little bit of transition on.
The team training element is highly underrated here, because this really reflects what the skill sets we're looking to instill in students that are coming up through a collegiate system that are part of esports, and how imperative that is to a corporate environment. Working as a team, it means everything, and there's very few corporate situations where you will not be working as a team. And if you do not come with those skills, and you have been isolated in terms of your approach, this is a very valuable way to get those skills and to do it in an environment that meets your passion. So I think that is something that I didn't really think about during this conversation, but it really is a benefit. Commissioner?
We hear that all the time now. We're talking to our administrators and our coaches, and some of the stereotypical high school esports players who are downstairs, by themselves eating Cheetos and that sort of thing. Now
Cheetos gets a lot of run from esports, yeah.
Now they're on a team. In some cases, not every case, but in some cases for the first time in their life.
Right.
And they've got to, they have to learn those lessons. But those are great life lessons. And that's another motivating factor for schools to want to have esports, because of the benefits. Just like athletics provides benefits of being on a team, there's so many benefits.
And not just universities, the K through 12 system, because now you're talking about building that coaching structure out that you're talking about. So it's a way to break through to kids that may not traditionally want to get into the athletics path, but still brings that type of camaraderie, teamwork, and ability. And I think this is the same equivalent from an infrastructure standpoint as when baseball went through its revolution. Like, people don't realize baseball was created in the 1800s. Little League fields didn't start popping up till 70 years later. And now think of a single town in America that doesn't have a Little League field. They barely exist. So you will start to see that infrastructure come through the K through 12 level, but there are challenges with that. Part of them were just discussed, the immense expense in this facility. Once you build a baseball field, you're mowing the lawn, you're keeping stuff up, it has a shelf life. This is a constant evolution. But I think what comes with that is all of these jobs and the benefit of this evolution being a constant wave of change that we will stay on top of, and also be producing the talent that helps drive. So I think those are all big benefits. How much time do we have? All right. Okay. Yeah, do you want to open up to questions? Because we have an incredible panel here. So anybody got any questions for our incredible panel? Sandy?
We touch on this topic. What is the career path for the kids to play esports in college, and then what happens next? Can you guys talk about the path for kids?
Sure. So just in the time that I've been involved, which is 6 years, not only have we seen so many schools start an esports program, but they've started a lot of them have started academic programming around it, and not just classes. In some cases, majors and degree programs, and not to train them to be competitors, but to train them to go into this massive industry, There's in every part of the esports ecosystem, from the highest level in terms of venture capital to develop money to fund some of these things, and all the way down to just all the things that Aman was talking about, event management and all the press and the social media part and the graphics and the game design and by the way, just in my time also, I've seen so many jobs created by all these schools that have started esports programs, and everyone, for us to be part of the ECAC, you have to have a full-time administrator who owns it. But not only are many of them hiring somebody for that role, but they're hiring 1 or 2 coaches or maybe more. And then there's so much transition now. Somebody who was here and started this program is suddenly moving up because there's other bigger fish that are saying, you did that at that school? Oh my God, come here. So we see all kinds of movement. So it's significant.
Great point, because amateur sports funds pro sports and the interest in pro sports. Like the amateur side, in terms of how big it is in Pee Wee football all the way up, it's what fuels the NFL. If nobody gets involved and plays at a young age, so it's the same thing. You're building a pathway all the way back. Now, to answer your point, Sandy, in terms of even more jobs that I could think of beyond those, a game studio is like almost like a film production entity, but with a longer longevity. The average game, you can have smaller games that cost in the hundreds of thousands to develop, but you have games that are $150, $200 million to develop that have 300 full-time employees dedicated just to that game that manage every aspect of it and that have yearly update cycles that sometimes go 6 years. I mean, there's a big thing online right now about how certain games that have a shelf life that are older are being taken off for people to play and are only now available on certain systems. Those are games that were released in 2014. You know what I mean? So it's the shelf life on some of these things is incredible in terms of the interest and what goes into maintaining those and keeping them up. They're all high-tech jobs for the most part, so I think that's the exciting part.
Yeah, and just to follow up on your question, I think that esports is a growth industry. It's growing both horizontally and vertically, right? So there's a lot of opportunity within esports, but there's also a lot of transferable skills, right? I mentioned that before, but I think about what we do in terms of esports broadcasting, what it takes to run an esports facility, the marketing, the event management, all the things that we've been talking about, right? Those aren't just siloed to esports. Those are transferable skills in other verticals, right? So we train them up, they get involved now, but then they can either work in esports, which of course is exploding, but they can also work in other industries using those skills. And that's really what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of our graduates now who have come through the program, they're moving into the industry. Very few of them are actually working in esports, although there are a few that are working in esports. Many of them have taken the skills that they've developed through collegiate esports and are now applying that in their full-time job in whatever industry they work.
Awesome. We only have a few minutes, so I want to get final statements from our guests, starting with you, Sarah.
With me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think the big thing to know is while esports is still technically just getting started in the collegiate scene, it's also been around a while. And there are a lot of folks that have gone through multiple phases of where this area and this avenue is kind of building. There are so many different variations of players within the collegiate esports space that are really starting to figure out how to work together, which I think is awesome. But the biggest thing is that this industry has a ton of career potential for all kids and all students that are going through. There's a huge connection to STEM, yes, but there's a huge connection to production. Business-minded folks are really needed within the esports space now more than ever. And we've seen just students at our school it's really the direction that they're going in and where their capstone projects are kind of focused on is that the esports industry is really an evolution of the entertainment industry. So everything that you've been seeing from an entertainment perspective is also indicative in esports. And so while the path to pro might be a little bit different than it does exist for traditional sports, the path to career is really strong there. And you can tie in a connection between what students' interests are and kids' interests are within these game worlds, and the opportunity to work in this space is is vast. Anything from, yes, the development of the games and the making of the games, but like Aman was touching on earlier, just all of the jobs that associate with what this industry is provides a huge potential and a huge opportunity for students that have a strong interest in esports. So continuing to foster that through these programs or through publisher opportunities and through pro team programs is really going to be what continues to grow this industry as we start seeing these students graduate with experience being a part of the industry and now taking it to improve it as they leave and go on out and start leading programs at other schools or within other organizations. So it's awesome.
Thank you so much, Iman.
Yeah, I was just to piggyback on that and what Dan and DJ hit on too. But like what Dan said, where he's at, being a commissioner of ECAC, NECC, and Nate Star League, they have internship programs. I get emails on them probably like once a month or twice a month, and I let my kids know so they can let me know if they want to get into the program. So I sign them up. So they're helping growing that interest to get into it, not through the pro path, like was mentioned. So letting the kids know, reminding them that there are aspects of what they're doing now on their own. They're having their own Twitch channel. You're developing skills there that can then forward into something else. So it's showing them the opportunities are out there, because once they see all the opportunities, eventually the switch will get flipped. And they're like, okay, I got the confidence and I know this because I did this at my university or at my high school, and I could go to the next level and use the skills that I learned. So yeah, we just got to keep reminding them of that. Keep it fresh and always keep it new, because Gen Z, you got to keep them in. You got to get their attention span and keep it. So that's the biggest thing on moving forward. Commissioner.
Yeah, so I teach this class called Esports Industry and Events, right? And it's going to be part of a esports management major at some point, let's hope, right? And we go through the same exercise that Aman described before, where we'll put on clips of esports events that have happened, right? And we'll freeze frame it, and we'll look at different aspects of those events through the lens of what are the people that you don't see in this picture doing, right? Because there's obviously a lot that you don't necessarily see. And we walk through that. And it really, to go back to his point before about how important that is, because people think about esports, they think about the players, right? They're thinking, I want to be a pro player, I'm going to be a pro player, that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is, most students are not going to be pro players. And even the life cycle, the pipeline to become a pro player is not that of traditional sports, right? If you think about what is the path for a football player look like, right? They play in elementary school, they eventually get to high school, they play collegiate ball, and then they go to the pros, right? It doesn't work like that in esports. In esports, they go to K through 12, then they go pro, and then maybe they'll go back to college, right? So it's a completely different landscape, and it comes with its own unique set of challenges. One of those challenges includes that professional esports players can also play collegiately at the same time, right? That's not something that typically happens in traditional sports. So I think that we're on the precipice of a lot of emerging issues in collegiate esports as we sort of progress down this path, right? As things are growing, more schools are engaged, there are issues in esports governance that are emerging. So I think that is going to be an interesting aspect to follow throughout the next 3 to 5 years.
I've always used this analogy. If you have a sports management program at a school, the expectation of your students is not to become the next quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles by participating in it, right? So even if you participate in esports, even competitively, the expectation should be finding your place in this world and finding something you're good at and you can contribute and make a living at while you're enjoying your passion. So we want to make sure people understand the purpose of the EIC isn't to promote professional gaming. That's not what it's about. It is about this gigantic ecosystem of jobs that are surrounding the activity and trying to make sure that those jobs have the skill sets coming out of incredible institutions like Stockton, Rowan, Rutgers, all the ones we have in the state, schools up north, NJIT, Stevens, that the curriculum that's being taught matches with what the industry wants, right? That's part of the mission. Commissioner, I'll give you a final word.
Sure, yeah, so I think just to wrap up, as much change and growth as we've seen in intercollegiate esports in the last 5 years, I think the next 5 years will bring just as much, if not more, and it's hard to predict what way it goes. I do think one thing we didn't necessarily talk about today was women in esports, and Title IX is a real issue, and it's a real issue for colleges, even if it's not under your athletics department umbrella. It absolutely applies. And so we've tried to do some things to get at that with women's only leagues as well. And one thing we did this year with our women's all-star showcase were great esports participants from one school paired with others. And we did an all-star showcase. But I think we're gonna have to spend more time with that, because for universities to really go all in and fund it like we're seeing, I think at some point they're going to have to answer to what are they doing on the women's side. So that's just one thing I wanted
Do you
to
find the
mention.
participation to be drastically male versus female in terms of the competitive students you
It
mentioned?
still is. Yeah, across the board that we're seeing, yes.
Yeah, I think that's like a literal entire set of panels to discuss those issues, because they are extremely important issues, and inclusion and diversity, and being able to make sure that people feel comfortable being in those environments in a collegiate. Because sometimes it's just as simple as if you step into a room of a bunch of guys that are playing video games, you're not comfortable.
Correct, but there's all the social issues as well. But I'm referring, and that's huge as well. But I'm referring to the Title IX, the legal requirement, and ultimately schools are going to have to deal with that. So
Does it apply currently, or is it based on how esports is associated? Because some esports programs are club programs. They're not part of the traditional chain.
So it applies to clubs as well. It doesn't matter if it's inside of athletics, varsity club, you name it. It does apply. It's not necessarily being enforced right now, but it can, and I do think it will at some point. And it is possible to. Title IX has an exception where if you're doing a lot to encourage the underrepresented gender in that, that buys you some time until your numbers are more equal. And I presume many schools are going to rely on that if they are held, if someone does call them out on that.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you very much to my panelists. Really appreciate it. We'll take a short break. I feel like the Mario music is playing.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. We're taking a 5-minute break. So if you guys want to grab something somewhere else.
All right.
Hi, so everyone can we're gonna take a 5-minute break for some coffee, some bagels, help yourself. We're gonna come back here at about 5 after 11, so 5-minute, 10-minute break. And we're gonna start on esports and marketing and how that's important. Thanks.
Okay, one
Oh,
more.
and all of this is streamed live to YouTube.
One more. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.